newspapermen meet such interesting people.
Coming up on the Media Project, Alan Chartock, Ira Fessfeld, Barbara Lombardo, and me, Rex Smith, talking about issues in the news media in recent days. We'll talk about that important libel case involving Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. Of course, in the media coverage, we'll look at the role of the media after mass shootings, and we'll talk about who's making the decisions on what's newsworthy and a lot more. Join us for the Media Project next.
They wallow in corruption. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. They know the lowdown, now it can be told. I'll tell you quite reliably off the record about some charming people I have known. For I meet politicians and grafters by the score, killers plain and fancy, it's really quite a bore. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. They wallow in corruption, crime and gore. Ting-a-ling-ling, city desk, full of press, extra, extra, read all about it, it's a mess, meets the test. Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. It's wonderful to represent the press. Now
The Media Project gives you a half hour of commentary and analysis dealing with what's been going on in the news media in recent days with some veteran journalists. That would be Barbara Lombardo, formerly executive editor of the Saratogian and the Record in Troy, and former publisher of the Daily Freeman in Kingston, New York, Ira Fessfeld. Of course, Dr. Alan Chartock, the CEO of Northeast Public Radio, and I'm Rex Smith, formerly editor of the Times-Union, now writing the Upstate American. And I hope you all are well today. Yes?
Well, let the record show that you're on time today.
Extraordinary.
We get Alan and the station get their money's worth.
Speaking of getting the money's worth, I have here in my hand, let me open up this piece of mail from a lovely reader that I want to read. Dear Mr. Smith, it says, it was sent here to WAMC from someone in Johnstown, New York. David, actually, not a woman. Dear Mr. Smith, if panel guests are not paid by WAMC, have you all picked up your paychecks? The station should give participants chits for donations to be used as income tax deductions. They deserve it. That would be us, I believe. And it would not cost the station a penny. You like that idea?
I know that my mother has passed, so it wasn't from her.
Yeah. That's all right.
Well,
and
this is our volunteer donation.
It is. It's a good opportunity for us to remind people.
And for the public.
Now, we used to get a bagel before you came onto the program.
Well, we had a big meeting about that. And,
no more bagels. But it's an opportunity.
Just so far we can go here.
So that's what we get here, bagels.
To, remind
bagel.
people to bagel.
Zero.
Got it.
Big zero.
Remind people to support WAMC. This is a good thing.
But thank you.
Very nice idea on the part of the... All right, and since we are talking about correspondence, Alan, we have some mail here. People took exception to a show a couple of weeks ago where we were saying we were denigrating the coverage of the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial, which I know you've been following closely.
Well, you can't resist it because it's on NPR of all places every day.
And everywhere else.
Yeah.
And this guy says...
Well, but NPR is supposed to have some standards.
Well, now there you go. This is what this guy is talking about.
Yeah.
Because he says the perpetual barrage of death, destruction, scamming, cheating, stealing, abusing, and general aggravation that we cannot escape from is too much. He's saying that the media focuses too much on the other stuff. He says Ukraine is just the same story over and over, and political corruption and mass homicide. And he says, on the last episode of the Media Project, we were insulted because we did not read the barrage of stories about the war in Ukraine. By extension, we were insulted because we avoided stories about all the death by guns, death by starvation, and the lying, cheating, stealing, etc., etc. And so he says, the American people does not deserve... The American people do not deserve to be insulted. We have read the newspapers and watched the TV, heard the song, and we know the lyrics. We should not be insulted because we do not want to listen to that song anymore. What do you think?
I think nothing, but I think we refer the whole matter to Ira Fussfeld on our.
Well, I actually
on our
have more
panel,
I have more to say about this than I would have had 24 hours ago, because I could care less about this trial, or so I thought. I didn't watch a lick of it. I didn't really care who won. My impression from afar was a pox on both their houses. And then yesterday, as we speak, the
What
verdict.
kind of pox? A monkey pox?
They announced that there's been a verdict reached, and my first reaction, because it's all about me, is, oh nuts, I'm going to be on the roundtable panel tomorrow, and they're going to want to talk about this, and I don't know anything about it. So I started reading about it, and although I don't think it deserved wall-to-wall coverage on the cable channels, and both of the principals just disgusted me in the fact that they couldn't settle this privately. There were some issues that needed to be raised regarding sexual harassment, sexual abuse, a man being falsely accused. I mean, those kinds of issues are real issues, and they were brought to the fore. So I feel now a little chagrined that I didn't follow it closer all along the way. Do you agree, anyone?
I have two different thoughts about this whole case. One, the fact that we denigrated it, I think, kind of affirms how people who run media are out of touch with what people find interesting, and that until we fix that, we're still going to be scratching our heads for decades and for time immemorial to say, why don't people want to hear more about this important stuff we're trying to tell them? Why do they want to know this salacious, gossipy, culturally interesting stuff that
And how
about
do you answer
celebrities?
your own question?
That we have to do both. But there's another aspect to this that I think we've overlooked, and that this was a libel case. And that as journalists, we need to be interested in following how a jury dealt with a case that had to do with libel, and whether it was malicious, I think, was the reason that the jury decided that she didn't prove her case.
The Washington Post
There was not actual
was not
malice.
sued. In other words, her allegations were primarily in an op-ed that she wrote for the Washington Post. And the Washington Post was not sued, as it could have been. She would not have won the case, but
But it was an individual suit.
So what about the fact, though, that, I mean, the fact is this was carried a lot, as Alan was upset that NPR actually carried the story, and you're saying, well, this is not something we should turn up our nose at. Actually, Alan, you shouldn't turn up your nose at this.
Well, actually, I should, and I'll tell you why.
All right. Tell us why.
No, we actually have to understand what's going on here. A bunch of people who make decisions about what's going to be in the newspaper are sitting around a table, and they say, should we carry this story or shouldn't we? One person says, nah, it's a bunch of nonsense. Somebody else says, wait a second, this is, and I think Barbara said, this is what people want to hear about, and we want to give them what they want to hear about. And is that our justification of how we decide what news is?
It's one of the criteria. So you want to present to people what we think they want to know,
Yes.
what they need to know, what they ought to know, and those are three things.
Yeah, but at
there's
least
subtle
one
differences.
But at least one of those is very arrogant, and I never want to tell you you're being arrogant, but very arrogant, in which we make the decision about what they need.
That's our
That's our job, you
Well,
know, and I'm
yeah.
sorry that you consider it arrogant for us to be responsible
I
about deciding
consider
what's
your whole
important.
tone of voice to
It
be
is. Well,
arrogant.
I'm telling you that that it is not a simplistic thing. You don't just say, oh, gee, I wonder what people want to know. That is not the way anybody makes these decisions. You decide what is so important that it has to be there, even if it's not interesting, or what is so interesting that it has to be there, even if it's not important.
You sound so
That is-
arrogant yourself.
I am telling you just the fact of the matter. I'm sorry that that's arrogant, but that is how decisions are responsibly made by American journalists in the mainstream media.
And there is a lot to talk about this case because, as Ira mentions, oh, now men
I just
feel
want to
a
say
little-
I reject what Rich just said. Go ahead.
Well, but you've never had to do it.
We'll check
You've
that out.
never
Right.
actually made
We're
decisions.
shocked. I'm shocked to hear
First
that.
of all, I run a major station.
But you always tell us you don't get involved in the news
well,
decisions.
I watch things. So,
He's also told us how people who run newsrooms, whether it's broadcast or print,
you're all ganging
you
up
are
on me
you
now.
all
Well,
make,
but
you're
let's-
making those decisions whether you admit it or not.
Once again, as we and the public at large frequently do, we're judging the media based on what the cable networks did. The fact of the matter is that newspapers, by and large, from the largest to the smallest newspapers,
dying.
did cover this story. It's not like, even though Rex and I, as old editors, would have held our nose and printed it, the fact is stories ran. They didn't dominate the newspaper, but the information was there if you wanted it. What the cable news networks did was broadcast it wall to wall and give it, in my view, a disproportionate sense of importance.
We could just turn it off then. You don't.
You can
Nobody
turn it
makes
off.
you
Turn it
watch
off.
it.
Absolutely.
And you
Well,
know,
on
this-
newspapers, you can turn the page.
we're taping this on a
Or stop
Thursday
paying
morning
for it.
and driving into WAMC thinking about how now it's going to cost me $10 in gas
In
that we're not
gas,
reimbursed
yeah.
for, but that it's worth it for the volunteerism. I
Wait,
was
it's
listening
worth
to
it for the what?
to be here.
Oh,
It's
you're
very
right.
worth it to be here. So
right.
the
It's like buying a
but
ticket
on,
to the zoo.
But
It's your
flipping
privilege.
between WAMC, MSNBC, CNN, so the two cable stations were doing wall-to-wall coverage of the Queen's 100th birthday.
This morning, as we
gala.
speak, I
And
thought
it
saw
was,
the same
and,
thing.
And it reminded me, I figured we're going to be talking about the Johnny Depp case, but I'm thinking similarly to Alan's point, who decides that you want to hear wall-to-wall coverage? It was like covering this giant parade. It was
Of the Queen's
of the
70th?
Queen- Yes, that there were so many other things going on in the world, and how much.
Well, but somebody decides. I mean,
What is the criteria for someone deciding, as you just said?
for someone deciding news
That will
judgment.
cover the Queen. I mean,
Well, I mean,
for example, I can't get enough of the Queen. I love her.
Well,
I've
there you
always
go.
loved her. So
I don't
wanna
care
hear
at all about it. So you see, there's a wide range of options in the public, and you know
You
they're
couldn't
white.
care about the Queen?
Not really. No, I don't care about the Queen's
You always
70th.
act
We
as
went
such
to a war
royalty
to avoid the
yourself.
royalty.
Right.
That's right.
We want leadership of a country where it's just by your bloodline.
So
Come
it's well, like, you know,
Yes.
Donald Trump Jr. is of course running. So why not?
Oh, very good. But I'm bummed.
But, so, I mean, I think that there are so many elements that go into determining newsworthiness, and the legacy media, by and large, do a really good and thoughtful job of making these decisions, because you do give people something that's of entertainment value. You do give people what they need to know about foreign policy, about international conflicts, about domestic injustice, about gun laws. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that the legacy media do very well that make it easy to attack. For what reason? I'm not sure.
Well,
because
you
it's
know,
easy.
let me take a crack at that, if I may, Rick.
Okay.
In the old days, I would look at the paper that you were running, and I would say, must be a little short on news this morning because something, the criteria for what is appearing as the major headline.
I would say that about WAMC's newscast too. Oh my
Well,
God,
you
how
know,
boring
too
is
long,
this?
you
Right?
know,
It's the same
Rex,
thing. There are
this is-
days that are
Rex.
more newsworthy and days that are not.
Rex, that is so immature of you.
Just accurate. I don't care
That's so
who the
immature of you.
who the Fifth Ward council member is in Springfield, Massachusetts. I really don't.
Well, then don't listen.
Okay.
But an awful lot of people do, and
In the Fifth Ward of Springfield, I'm sure.
and want to know because we have created a community here at WAMC which covers a lot of territory, and sometimes people have to say, well, you know, this could be going on in my town, but I have listened carefully to it. Don't you see?
Yeah, and I think the same thing is probably true of the days when you were not interested in what was on the front page of the Times-Union. It was probably stuff that just
Only
didn't
based
interest
on
you.
the fact that you didn't have anything else to put there.
But you know, let's
so
remember
immature.
let's remember something. There are certain bromides that are worth reminding people about every so often, and one of them is if you don't sell newspapers by the selections of content that you have determined ought to be in the newspapers, or if you don't have listeners on the radio station because of the selection of stories, if you don't have those things over a period of time, you're not going to be in business any longer. The people who edit newspapers and who set up the content on radio and TV have a sense of who their audience is and what will enable people to read their papers and watch and listen to their programs. And I don't think you should apologize for that. Now, there are different ways to do it. The New York Post does it in a different way than the New York Times, but the New York Post has a different kind of readership than the New York Times, so they know what those readers want. WAMC has a different listenership than AM radio stations in this market. What you have on WAMC, you're not going to hear on an AM station. I don't even know the AM station's call letters in this town. But those are decisions that are made by professionals who have been in the business a long time.
Wait. So, Ira, just because
Yeah.
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
If somebody is a professional, a so-called professional, because there's some definitional problems there, you're telling us they have a sense of entitlement because they are.
No, I'm saying that people who have been put in charge of newsrooms or broadcast standards, etc., presumably have been in the business a long time. They have experience. They know their markets. They know their people. They know their listeners or readers, and it's with that frame of reference that they make decisions. Now, they could make bad decisions,
And they do make bad decisions all the time.
Like the Fifth Ward of Springfield.
Well, here's the thing about the Fifth Ward of Springfield. You're also making decisions, you meaning all of us who would be in those positions, you're making business decisions based on what is going to bring in your subscribers, your listeners, and WAMC has an enormously wide reach.
How do you know that?
Because I heard you say it on the station many a time, and I can, and whenever I'm driving around, I can hear it in a pretty strong
I just changed the
radius of
signal
people.
when I'm traveling. I just changed the signal to the next town over.
I can
Absolutely.
hear it well. I hear a lot of Springfield news. I hear very little Saratoga news. Now,
Well, you're not listening carefully enough because I hear Saratoga news all the time.
Well, one of the
I'm talking about
one of the
not the
problems
seasonal
with the
news about-
WAMC and all radio stations, although less so now that there's digital and the internet and stuff, is that if you're not listening to the time of day when the Saratoga story is on, you're likely not going to hear it and thus think there's no Saratoga stories. You may turn in every morning and hear the story from the lieutenant governor's race in Vermont, which you have
This
no
is
interest
why
in.
the digital revolution has been so important, because you can call up the Saratoga news, all the news you want,
Yes.
and get it by the Google machine, right? And that is superior to anything that any of us in our other media have been able to do. When it was just print newspapers, if you didn't get it into the printed page, you missed it that day. Whereas digitally, you can access whatever is available.
Yes,
Well,
and
I
I'd
hope I'm
also
not going to be called arrogant for this, but because you
Too late.
you would you would never do that.
you decide,
But
listeners.
yeah, you decide, listeners. Okay, so the three of you, let's face it,
Not
worked
three
for-
listeners. He means
worked
the three of
for
us
a
sitting here.
failed view of news dissemination. You worked for
failed view of news
failed,
dissemination.
Yes.
Stop.
You work for
Oh,
newspapers.
come on.
Oh,
That's so
please.
ridiculous.
That
I'm
is
sick
such
of
an
saying
Failed
that.
outrageous
is
I gotta
incorrect.
say.
You
That's
want to tell
crazy.
me that newspapers are going out of business? I can't disagree, but I wouldn't call
Wait
it
a
failed.
second. You
I would
can't
call
disagree.
it antiquated.
You're
If you
talking
can't
about
disagree,
print.
No,
that's
because
right
I
on
don't
the
like the
money.
word failed. I like the
Oh,
word.
I don't care
I
what
like
you
the way
like.
antiquated. Perhaps.
What is the major news site in the capital region?
What is the major news site?
The major
Like the
news
source?
digital source in the capital region. TimesUnion.com. Sorry, but I just have to state that is in fact the case, and that was a print product that is primarily now a digital product. So when you say news, you work for a failed thing, yeah, nobody is paying attention to print anymore, nor book publishing, by the way, Dr.
Or
Shartoff.
magazines.
Nor magazines.
think I
And
publish
incidentally,
books?
your field of work, higher education, people are dropping out of college and not coming in. There's a huge enrollment decline, and so I think that
Eat
the
your heart out,
enterprise
Rick.
that you were a part of is dying also. So the world is changing.
Oh, now you're
so there you
depressing me.
go.
Now you what? I'm
Now
sorry.
he's depressing me.
Yeah, it is.
The part about Springfield, I understand that the people in Springfield are going to want to hear news of their community.
Yes.
I enjoy hearing tidbits of those things because I want to know what's happening regionally, what's happening in
Exactly.
Vermont.
You're such a
There's some of
smart
that.
person.
But I figure there's also going to be a perceived or real or hoped for base of financial support for WAMC from that audience that would
Really?
justify. a lot
Otherwise,
of
you wouldn't
attention to
cover
that
it. If it
area.
weren't for the business
Wait a second.
proposition,
How dare you
if
impugn
you
our
didn't have
motives?
listeners over
How
there that
dare
you had
you
to
impugn-
Why is
serve,
that
you wouldn't
impugn-
care.
Why is
How
that
dare
impugn-
you impugn our motives?
That's not
with you?
impugning
you're
your
being-
motives.
Yes,
You're
that's-
serving your
yes,
listeners.
Exactly.
That's
Nobody's
exactly-
being impugned. It's a
No,
business
But
decision.
exactly
the thing
what
that you have to
newspapers do.
watch
It's not-
out for.
It's nothing personal.
The thing that you have to watch out for, both in radio and in print, is overestimating the importance of a marginal readership or listenership. And the real life example that I would give is we made a mistake at my old newspaper, the Daily Freeman of Kingston, New York, and we wanted to extend more aggressively in the southern part of our county because we thought we could get more readers.
You could also steal them from somebody else.
Well, that's the way to do it, right? Readers and advertising. Yeah. But we didn't succeed, and it wasn't because the content was no good, but because the geography was no good. People in the southern part of our market were more inclined to want to read the Poughkeepsie Journal or the Middletown Times-Herald Record or, going way back, the Newburgh Evening News, which is no longer in business. And as a result of us putting too many resources in that part of the world, we were covering our core area, our strength area, less so. And that made the local people who really counted on us mad.
So
why are you running all these stories about Wallkill and not about Saugerties?
So who made this bad decision?
We made a collective decision. We decided that this was a way to go. We had the resources, money to do that. But
Well, you didn't have the money because you shifted money. Haven't been in those same shoes.
Yeah.
It's moving money around.
It moved well,
but
the Freeman was a very lucrative paper, and we had the resources, and we could
but if you really had the resources, you would have added staff to cover those areas.
Which we did. We started. We actually made a mistake of publishing a separate edition for that market, the Southern Ulster County edition, and it was a mistake. Can't say it any more times than that. But the point is, WAMC, let's put the pressure back on Alan. If you're going to be interviewing all of the various candidates for lieutenant governor
in Vermont,
you may pick up 2 listeners in Vermont, but you're going to do it at the expense of losing people in this area who will say, he's doing that, I'm going to change the station.
Are you sure about that? Because
no, I'm sure about it.
Going up all the time
in Vermont.
I'm sure they are.
Well,
yeah.
It's probably dropping in Saratoga. Barbara says you don't cover them enough. So there you go.
Well, I didn't say they don't cover us enough. I'm saying I hear more Springfield news.
Well, it's so great that Barbara drives all the way down here to be on this radio.
I hope.
In the past.
And it's been great.
Hope you
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Be sure to pick up your chit for the taxis.
And you can stop next door and buy a bagel.
Here's a listener in Longmeadow, Mass. By the way, thank you to Roger who wrote that first letter.
Is that near Springfield?
I think it's right over there. It's just outside Zone 5, Ward 5. I have a suggestion for something new, Scott says, who might help educate our population and manage the emotional level in many issues. I think a show debate that has emphasize calm conservatives and liberals on it that could talk about different issues in a calm and educational manner, no name calling, and a fair amount of fact checking. Let's find the things we agree on and discuss the things we don't. I can't think of a show or TV on the radio that does this. So here is the question. What about a show featuring calm conservatives and liberals? Is that an idea?
People probably will not watch it because it'll be boring. I have one example, though, of the calmness, but it's in print. If you read the New York Times frequently on their op-ed page, they have a dialogue between Gail Collins on the left and Bret Stephens on the right. Mm-hmm. Now, the calmness is aided by the fact that it's on the printed page, so you can't hear if they're raising their voices. But it strikes me as a calm discussion.
Well, they're both smart and clever, and they do it by email, so it's they have time to think about what they're doing, you know?
But, if you turned on one of the talking head shows and you were calmly discussing things, it's likely to create a turnoff, I think.
Yeah.
I happen to agree with the premise. I'd like to see what he's talking about.
And there are the conservatives don't really represent anything politically anymore because the Republican Party, which is supposedly the conservative party, has abandoned rational conservatism and now is all about authoritarianism. I mean, I think it's absolutely true that there is no actual debate on issues involving conservative liberal. It is simply oppose Biden and seek to establish an authoritarian government.
Yeah, but what is interesting about the letter writer is his use of the word calm. Mm-hmm. Now, it does have a certain pejorative, impact when you say you're not calm like presumably like I am. I'm calm and you're not. Mm-hmm. That's a put down, people will. Do what they need to do in order to express themselves. And there's always somebody to tell you not to do it that way.
And calm down has never worked, has it? Calm down now, Barbara.
Calm down. That always makes me more calm. I think I like that letter writer's premise. And what they are asking for is civil discourse on controversial topics.
What do you mean by that?
So
Yeah,
And
I
it
think
could-
it's a
and it
great
could
idea,
be,
but I don't think it'd
you
work.
know, talking about the Second Amendment.
The Second Amendment. Now, there's an interesting topic for rational conversation, but rational conversation won't help there because that's not actually. There's going to be no action on the Second Amendment, isn't that right? I mean, this is the difficulty trying to resolve issues when you know when the political environment is such that nothing actually is going
But
to
the
happen.
type of discussion that letter writing is suggesting could be listening to both sides calmly explain their points of view.
Whatever that means. What's the calm side of listening to Donald Trump? I mean,
I'm not talking about Donald Trump.
no, what I am. But the point is, the listener's comment could be taken in any context that we want to think about. And in this case, Donald Trump's mouthings, maybe he's telling us you should be much more conservative about the way you answer or the way you talk or speak. I reject that wholeheartedly.
Well, let's talk about then the rational way to approach gun rights after Uvalde, for example, and
After everybody gets killed.
and mass shooting. Right. What about the media coverage? I mean, there is now this talk that we shouldn't be reporting the names of shooters. That covering the shooting inspires copycats. The contagion effect. Should coverage be different because of the likely impact of it?
I'm merely interested in the discussion about whether or not the newspapers or TV should use graphic images of the victims. Mm-hmm. There are people who believe that we've reached a point where we should be showing these dead bodies and what these guns are doing to people. As an old timer, I find it hard to say that's what I would want to do in my newspaper because I know the reaction that I used to get from readers for lesser graphic pictures that were on the front page. I'm not sure that that's the way to go.
What about the families of the victims?
Yeah, the families and just the old argument was if you ran a relatively graphic picture on the front page, how we'd get the calls. How could you do that? The newspaper shows up on our breakfast table every morning, and my young child sees that newspaper. You shouldn't have put that on the front page.
And you shouldn't have put it on the breakfast table.
The ink would rub off on the.
There's already so many horrible images of things on the internet that whether we publish these particular pictures or not is not going to make that any less horrible. I think the trap that I would want to resist falling into is thinking that if only people saw the horrible deaths that these children suffered by looking at what they looked like, that it would help win people over to
Right.
But there is no evidence that suggests that that's the case. And in fact, it could be the opposite could happen. It could say, look what happened to these children. This is why I need to have a gun, why we all need to have guns to protect our children. There's no evidence that shows that these will win people over to one side or the other. And I don't think we need to do it. It doesn't serve a purpose.
Yet the media needs to keep a spotlight on these issues, doesn't it, to continue. Well, it is newsworthy, but there is a public debate now that is perhaps rising that may, in fact, I guess, in the long run affect public policy, right?
Well, you need to be able to look somebody in the eye. This used to be my rule of thumb. If I can look somebody in the eye and justify why I put in, whether it was a headline, a phrase, a word, a photograph that affected their lives, I needed to be able to justify it. And I can't justify showing children being all shot up, the bodies. What greater good does that serve?
The greater good, of course, is that if we don't do something about this, we're going to have a lot more of this.
Well, there we go. That's about all we have time for this week.
I wasn't going to say anything on this show today. I came in here saying, I don't care about these people. I'm just going to sit there and shut my mouth. And then,
Well, there you go. Hope springs eternal. That's Alan Chartock, Ira Fussfeld, and Barbara Lombardo, and I'm Rex Smith, with gratitude to our producer, Dave Agostina, and to you folks for joining us this week, once again, on The Media Project.
New world to build. Meet the people, that's a thrill. All together fits the bill. Oh, newspapermen are such interesting people. It's wonderful to represent the guild. Now, publishers are such interesting people. Their policy's an acrobatic thing. They claim to represent the common people. It's funny, Wall Street never has complained. Ah, but publishers have worries, for publishers must go to working folks for readers and to big shots for their dough. Now, publishers are such interesting people. It could be prostitution, I don't know. Ting-a-ling-a-ling, circulation, ting-a-ling-a-ling, advertising, get those readers, get that payoff. What a headache, what a mess. Oh, publishers are such interesting people. Let's give 3 cheers for freedom of the press.